Who and what is the Committee of 300? I've told you this is a supranational body that knows no boundaries, respects the laws of no countries. The first time that they were publicly announced was by a German socialist by the name of Walter Rathenau. He was the financial advisor to the Kaiser of Germany, and he was also the financial advisor to the Rothschilds, the French family Rothschild. So he must have known what he's talking about. He made an astonishing statement in 1934. He said, there is a committee of 300 men that rule the world. They are known only to each other, and nothing happens without their consent. When former head of state Mikhail Gorbachev visited the United States a few years ago, flanked by George Bush and Quayle, he opened his Gorbachev Foundation in the United States. And he let slip, he said, this is being done with approval of the Committee of 300. CNN cameras were on him. They immediately switched. Now, I wrote to CNN and I said, could I have a transcript of this program, which they said was available. I never got a reply. The federal government, the secret upper-level parallel government that runs the United States, does not want you to know that you have an upper-level parallel government that calls the shots, that dictates what is going to happen to your life and mine.
This just in, Nigeria caps ATM cash withdrawals at $45 daily to push digital payments. They want to be able to surveil transactions and push the adoption of the e-Naira CBDC, which means restricting cash. Lynn Alden goes on to explain that the problem, of course, with a fully digital and custodial payments world is that people lose all privacy and can have their funds frozen for any number of reasons. A cashless world enables greater levels of authoritarianism. Lynn Alden goes on to reference a Cointelegraph article that reports Iran may be using bank account freezes on women who don't wear a hijab. Iran's plan to freeze bank accounts reinforces the need for decentralized currencies to exist in tandem with cash and CBDC.
Don't y'all remember how hard crack and even drugs hit the streets in the 80s? And did y'all ever wonder where it came from? In this interview, I'm about to show y'all Gary Webb will expose everything there is to know about how the CIA trafficked drugs into our country in the 80s. Listen up to the video.
Operated along the west coast of the United States throughout most of the 80s. And they were funneling, they were selling cocaine in South Central. They were also selling it in Oakland. They were selling it in San Francisco. They were selling it in San Jose. And some of the money they were making was going to support an army that the men who ran the cocaine ring worked for, called the FDN. This was an army that the CIA started in 1981 and supported.
Better known to us, most of us who remember, is the Contras from Nicaragua. So go right ahead.
The men that were running the cocaine ring were top officials of this Contra army. And what we found was that they were selling this stuff in South Central, which is a predominantly black section of Los Angeles, immediately before the outbreak of the crack cocaine epidemic. They started selling powder, tons and tons and tons of powder cocaine was going into this one small area of the city. And from there, they sold it to Freeway Rick. And Freeway Rick took the powder, turned it into crack, and starting in 1983, 1984, began distributing it to predominantly the gangs, the Crips and the Bloods in Los Angeles.
Kind of a code name for a master plan originated at the United Nations to change the political and economic system of the world to one of total collectivism. And in order to do that, people must not be allowed to have independence. They must be dependent on the state for everything. Otherwise, they won't be easily controlled by the state. That means they can't have private property, mostly. They cannot have land of their own. They have to live in, preferably, high-rise apartments that are provided to them by the state as a benefit, so to speak. Oh, good, we got a free apartment. But these people at the top want all humans to be dependent on the largesse of the state. That means that they don't want anybody living out in the boonies. Anybody that's got a couple of acres of land and his own water supply and can grow his own food and that kind of thing, or have some sheep or some chickens, these people are
What's something you'll get a lot of hate for if you say it out loud? that 99% of the American population has been brainwashed into believing it is normal to spend 50 years doing something you don't really want to do for 5 days a week and trading all of that for 10 or maybe, if you're lucky, 15 years of freedom when you're old. It is not normal. It does not make sense. In fact, it's stupid.
That's a washing machine.
What does it wash?
Clothes.
Can you imagine?
An electric motor spins the cylinder as water is pumped through the machine. Soap is added here, and the agitation removes any soiling.
What does that wash?
That's a refrigerator. The top compartment keeps food frozen, and the bottom compartment maintains a temperature of 38 degrees.
And you sell these?
We rent them.
So you sell electricity, and then you rent all the things that need electricity?
More or less.
We don't need any of these things.
Well, the conveniences. Their use gives you time to do other things.
What other things?
Well, like other chores.
Well, you invent machines to do those, then what do we do?
Go on a picnic. Go for a swim. Go to the cinema. You can enjoy a more leisurely life.
It ain't more leisurely, because we gotta work more to pay for all this stuff. He's got you there.
This is the future. Every home in New York City has electricity. They have refrigerators, and some even have electric stoves.
Now here's the thing. We buy all this stuff, we're not working for ourselves anymore, we're working for you.
The Complainus Americanum, or better known as the North American Karen. Karens may appear to be quiet and unassuming, but they're one of the most dangerous creatures on the planet. A minimus wagus, the Karen's natural prey. He unassumingly walks into the Karen's vast territory. The Karen adjusts her posture. Now fully erect, unlike her husband, she's ready to strike. The Karen attacks with full force. Karens stun their prey with a variety of techniques, causing chaos and confusion. She's used to dominating, and today is no different. The minimus wagus never stood a chance. The Karen is victorious. Her meal conked. Her hunger for undeserved respect is satisfied. For now.
We hear so much about this slavery. 200 years ago, our grandfathers were slaves. Well, for God's sakes, did we have anything to do with that? I had no part in it. I had no slaves. My folks didn't. My grandparents didn't. Are they blaming us for what happened 3 years ago? Let's forget the past. Think of the future. Build up the future. And why keep hemming and hawing over the same thing over and over and over again? And they say, you must give me land because my grandfather was a slave. Well, then I would say, for God's sakes, find the man who had your grandfather as a slave and then demand the land from him. Don't bother me because I had no part of it.
You are still enjoying the accumulated wealth that began with the enslavement of our people. And if you're going to enjoy the wealth that was generated by evil, then you must take the curse that comes along with it. Therefore, even though you personally had nothing to do with it, but because you have received stolen goods, you must pay the price as well. And because you fight and struggle to protect those stolen goods, and you defend them, and you organize your society and your relationship to my people to maintain them and to continue to enhance them, then you must pay the price.
This is the Highway to Nowhere, a just over 1 mile stretch of sunken highway that used to be a vibrant black neighborhood. The Highway to Nowhere is a failed construction project from the 1970s that tore apart West Baltimore. It uprooted over 1,500 people and destroyed dozens of business in an attempt to connect white suburbs with downtown Baltimore. The botched highway still sits there, and the city recently called it a physical and symbolic barrier to progress. If you don't have a car, getting from West Baltimore to East Baltimore by public transit can take hours. Yesterday, Baltimore received $2 million to finally make redevelopment plans for the Highway to Nowhere. Governor Moore called it a critical step forward for the city, and we'll be following what happens next.
To ruin it for a lot of people that love St. Patrick's Day. First of all, it has nothing to do with Irish pride. That's how it was shown later. There's nothing to do with leprechauns or Irish pride. Has nothing to do with that.
You just killed two great fantasies.
I know.
Right there.
Really, if you look into what that was, is that St. Patrick, right? The St. Patrick was a Roman. His father was a Roman official, and he was tasked, just like the Roman Empire did with destroying the Gnostic people who originally were the Egyptians and burning the Library of Alexandria. He was tasked with going to Ireland and the UK and Scotland area, but we specifically think of it as Ireland because that was the core of this,
right.
Where they went there and they were supposed to eradicate the last group on the planet that was still studying was that ancient old religion who were known as the serpents. So if you look at the story of St. Patrick, he was ridding the serpents, the snakes, right? The snakes from Ireland. But if you look all throughout geologic history of that region, there's never been snakes that lived there. It's a metaphor. It's a metaphor for the Druid people and pagans as a more general term, anyone who didn't follow this monotheistic Christian religion. And they were seen as a threat because they were the last group that had the ancient knowledge, and they were greatly demonized later. So what happened was, you're celebrating the representation of the genocide and cleansing of the last serpent group on the planet, the Druids who built Stonehenge.
If you are a descendant of immigrants who have come to the United States since the 1960s, I want you to take a look at this picture and keep this in mind if you ever have the question, or if you hear others have the question about, well, my parents came to this country, my grandparents, my great-grandparents came to this country with nothing, not speaking English, not knowing anyone, and they were able to make a life for themselves. Why can't Black Americans seem to do the same? So here's some homework for those of you who have that question, or if you hear others who have this question, take some time and look through Google to see what all of these things are. What is chattel slavery, specifically chattel slavery? You might have heard of Jim Crow. You probably haven't heard of black codes. You probably haven't heard of some major racial massacres against black folks in the United States and descendants of enslaved people. Maybe you have heard of redlining, but maybe you don't know about how the war on drugs is very much a racial issue. This is going to give anyone with these kinds of questions a really good sense as to just a sample of some of the things that Black Americans have had to face in this country that is very specific to their racialized experience, that folks who are immigrants or children of immigrants, grandchildren of immigrants who have come since the 1960s, that we have not had to deal with, and our parents.
As the Panthers organized voter registration drives, health centers, and food distribution programs, they won growing support in Black communities nationwide. But an escalating cycle of shootouts, arrests, and eventually what Panthers claimed were assassinations by police led to the almost complete elimination of the Black Panther Party by the early 1970s.
How do they die? Hey, in 1969, the FBI, through its counterintelligence program, targeted the Panthers for elimination. There's plenty of documentary evidence that shows this. In that year alone, in 1969, 26 Panthers were killed by local law enforcement agents, and 750 Panthers were imprisoned or jailed. The organization was largely destroyed systematically by the local and federal authorities.
So what started to happen was when Public Enemy, and I remember this vividly, my album was called Knowledge is King. It's going into a whole spiritual space about knowledge and being intelligent. KRS-One was saying Jesus was black. And Public Enemy was saying it takes a nation of millions to hold us back. That's all 88, 89, and by the time we got to 90, the powers that be said this black conscious movement is moving without radio play, it's moving completely underground, and there's an underground subculture of positive, pro-black, intelligent people. We cannot have this movement happening. So the unfortunate part for gangster, quote-unquote gangster rap was they started to handpick what they were going to play. And this is the part that you know. They went from not playing rap because they said it was too edgy and not melodic enough to playing the most profane rap and beeping the curses out. That's how bad they wanted to get that content on the radio. There's nothing on the radio that hasn't been paid for. So that was an investment. So the part that we're really, really underestimating is if you have PE over here and you have Biggie over here, we're going to say we're going to put more money into Biggie because we understand his content. And this is back to freedom of speech without question. I love a lot of what Biggie did. I love a lot of what NWA did, but they started to make us one-dimensional. So instead of seeing that there was the Black Panther and the Mac, they started only showing the Mac.
Folks, I hate to say it, but white folks are largely professional gaslighters when it comes to race. We are professional liars when it comes to race. It's part of white supremacy and how it functions and how it works. From the very first African that was enslaved, we have been gaslighting black folks as white people. That's our culture. That's our tradition. That's our indoctrination. And that's what we do. And that's what we do best. We lie every single day. And we lie to black people. We lie to each other. We lie to ourselves about race. We gaslight. Gaslight, if you don't know, it's a psychological term. It's where the abuser tells the victim that this reality of you being abused is not really happening. It's just something in your imagination. You're being paranoid. You're being too sensitive. All this abuse is not real. And if it is real, it's only because you deserved it. I was trying to help you. It's justified somehow. We have always justified our racism. And if we're not justifying it, we're denying it. If we're not denying it, then we're deflecting it. The last thing white people would do is simply acknowledge the truth racially. That's why I say we're bullshit artists. We are professional fucking liars and gaslighters. That's exactly what we do as white people, and that's the fucking truth. And if you deny it, you're a fucking liar. 90% of white people today, right now in America, no matter how young or how old, we've been so profoundly indoctrinated that we cannot simply acknowledge the truth racially. Can't do it. And if we do it, there's a but or a deflection. Can't do it. 90% of us will not do it. So this is why we are gaslighting academically. This is why Black history all around America right now is being criminalized. That tradition of gaslighting, that tradition of hiding, that tradition of pretending racism's not real is their educational system. And they want to protect that tradition. They do not want the truth to be out. People know that the hope is with the younger generation. Isn't that what they always say? I hope the younger people, I hope the next generation will do better. They know that if the truth ever gets taught racially, that's why CRT is banned. That's why if you talk about race, it's banned. All around America, states, counties, schools, teachers, threat of arrest, black stories, beautiful black books, banned, erased, censored, libraries, empty, criminalization of black history, folks. Because why? Because white people are racist. White people are all about denying. White people are all about gaslighting. That's our tradition. Deny, deflect, never teach the truth, never acknowledge the truth. Because if we do, if we teach the truth, what will happen? White supremacy could be threatened. Economic advantages for white people, the dominant position could be threatened. They're threatened. Like all bullies are threatened. They're threatened by their victims. So of course they don't want the truth to be taught. So what do? They keep it whitewashed. They keep the lies perpetrating. The narratives, the whitewashing. Pretend George Washington, Andrew Jackson were heroes as they owned hundreds of slaves. Keep pretending. Keep denying. Keep whitewashing. Let's not learn about black heroes. Let's not learn about black stories. Let's not learn about black history. Let's not learn about black contributions. Why? Because that would be the truth. And that's not our tradition. We're supposed to promote whiteness. That's how white nationalism works. They pretend that, we're innocent. We're trying to protect the sensitivity of our white children. No, you're not. You're trying to keep white supremacy and your privilege alive. You want to be on top the same way that your parents wanted to be on top and their parents wanted to be on top. That's how white supremacy works. It's a power thing. The idea of dismantling white supremacy cannot happen until we can teach our children the truth.
There's a book that was written by these two white gentlemen called Without Sanctuary. If you ever get a chance to read it, it is one of the most profoundly disturbing books I've ever seen in my life. It's a pictorial history of lynchings and what they used to call nigger barbecues. I'm talking about children, women, male adults lynched. And then they used to put us alive on spits with a fire beneath it and turn us and roast us until we dehydrated. And they'd pick up pieces of the bodies, and hundreds of whites would be standing and taking pictures with a body piece in their hand. They have the pictures, they show the pictures in the book. And they say, just get over that? You don't get over that. You have to move on. You have to live your life. You have to grow. You have to accomplish. You cannot use excuses. But that is in spite of your history.
Moors? Who? The Moors? Shakespeare's Othello? The Moor Venice? The Moors were the Muslims of Northwest Africa, and they taught Europeans new techniques in science, mathematics, chemistry, physics, philosophy. The Moors ruled Spain for 800 years. You expect me to believe Africans ruled Spain and brought all that to Europe before slavery? Yes. There were well-lit paved roads in Spain hundreds of years before a paved street in Paris or a street lamp in London. Africans were advanced. You make the Moors sound like the Jetsons and the Europeans like the Flintstones. It's not my intention, but the Moors designed modern cities and lived in palaces, while Europeans slept in barns alongside their animals. That's disgusting. The Moors taught Europeans hygiene, music, fashion, chess, three-course meals, tablecloths. Many of the things you attribute to Europe being advanced and civilized were taught to them by Africans. Okay, tie this back to Africans discovering America? Oh, wait. Do I even have to? With everything you just heard, could you not see how it's possible for an advanced people to journey to the Americas while Europe was literally still in the Dark Ages? There must be another eyewitness besides the Africans. Yes, Christopher Columbus wrote in his journal how Native Americans confirmed that black-skinned people came from the southeast on big boats, trading in gold-tipped spears, long before he arrived.
Know that in the early Americas, the term Moorish was substituted with the word Indian? Yes, and you can find the reference in this book called The Karankawa Indians, the Coast People of Texas, by a man named Albert Samuel Gatchett. On page 6, he describes a piece that was found in a museum in 1596 as being a Moorish hat. On this page, he goes on to state that in 1621, the word Indian was substituted for Moorish. On page 9, they also describe an Indian axe that belonged to a Moorish king. And remember, this is as described in 1596, more than 2 decades prior to the first so-called Africans arriving in Virginia. An Indian axe that belonged to a Moorish king. The question is, who is this king that this axe belonged to? This Moorish king. Well, if you didn't know, this Moorish king was actually Montezuma. And the reference is here. This weapon belonged to Montezuma II, king of Tenochtitlan in Mexico.
Is there racism in the classrooms of this country, and what form does it take?
There's definitely still racism in the classrooms of this country, and it takes all of the subtle and overt forms that we have always known since our enslavement in this land and more. Because we both have children. We know that the children today are more visually sophisticated than any group of people probably the planet has ever known. A chalk and a blackboard, a book, a tablet and a pencil will not bring out what there is within these children any longer. We're not trying to do innovative things that are rooted in what we know, the tried and true, to reach and teach our children. One of my great passions is to untap the genius and the talent that resides within these children. Their genius is in the streets, on the ball fields, in the recording studios, and then they're functional illiterates in the classroom. Why? This is a real serious question that I have personally been engaged in for more than 20 years now, both in higher education and now at the coalition. But the racism is in the textbooks. It's in the very structure of the language that we bring to this. I know you have had our brother Malefi Asante on the program. It is in, most particularly, and I don't know how I can state this strongly enough, the power of expectations. The research has shown for more than 50 years now that there's only one direct corollary to the performance of a child in school, and that is the expectation that the teacher and the family and the community, society around that child has of that child. Right now, our children have such dwarfed perceptions of themselves. They are treated almost like criminals and prisoners in our school systems, and they can't hope to emerge from that, and much of that is racial.
Indeed just released a report talking about how half of black workers are thinking about leaving their jobs. And in fact, I think it's way more because I've been witnessing this. As someone who works directly with organizations around anti-oppression, I observe this every single day. So often I'll see organizations only engage in equity work when they have hired their first black person. Or they're only doing it because something horrible has already happened at the organization itself, but also globally. And we witnessed that as well. Additionally, that black employee or black employees are burdened with educating others around equity. This is, mind you, simultaneously while they are experiencing microaggressions and racism in the world, but also within their own organization. And then often organizations are confused as to why black employees are leaving. It's quite clear. It's racism. It's anti-blackness. Organizations are saying a lot, but they're not doing enough. I get why black folks want to leave organizations. Why would you want to be somewhere that's anti-black? We witnessed entire organizations around the world change their structures, programming, and the way they work because of the pandemic. It's proof that an entire overhaul is possible. Organizations can change, but only if they really actually want to change. So think about that first.
I see dogs on television eating out of the same plate with white people. I see dogs in the buses, and they do everything with the dogs. So I ain't getting nothing the dog ain't got. So really, ain't nothing in this integration. I need some land. I need some jobs. My people need jobs. We need something so we can build and do for ourselves, and we must have some land. Now, what's your suggestion? What should be my movement? Integrate?
Yeah, equal rights in a mixed society.
In this society, where you still own the government, you still own the train station, the railroad plant, the lecture plant, these television cameras, you still make all the food, you control everything, and I'm like a leech on a dog's back. All I can do is just wait for you. I can't do nothing for myself. Integrating in your society don't mean I'm doing nothing for myself. You doing it all. I want to do something for myself. I'm tired of depending on you. You might get broke one day. Your stores might close. Your gas pumps might cut off again. I'm relying on you now. Can I have my own land and country?
That racism, white racism, is a mental illness. Now, I say that because many white social scientists would like to define racism as something normal in the culture, as a cultural variant. And I think as long as we approach it that way, we really don't deal with the pathology of racism itself. It's like saying that cancer, because a lot of people have in this society, that cancer is somehow normal. But we know that cancer kills, and racism kills and destroys also. And it would be like defining Hitler's slaughter of the Jews as somehow normal. And I think we have to face the fact that racism is a mental aberration. And I think underlying white racism is a white paranoia, a fear or a delusion that black people, colored people in the world are somehow going to destroy and hurt the white man. And it's very convenient, I think, for whites to project their impulses, their unacceptable feelings onto blacks and pretend that they are the wholly good ones and make blacks the victims. So I think that racism is something that doesn't only affect the victim, that is the black man, but also affects the victimizer, the white man, and it's bad for his mental health too, because he doesn't face himself honestly. He pretends that the problem lies outside of himself, so that this society never deals with its violence, its own perversion, its own corruption. They pretend that somehow if you get rid of all the niggers, that everything will be solved, we'll be much better off. And of course that's not so, but that's a delusion.
The whole African-American thing is to omit, you see, the indigenous black man of this particular land too. What's that? When we bought the African-American term, we cut out all of the Caribbean, all of South America, all of Latin America. And this is another way to reclassify you, you see what I'm saying, outside of power. That's a political move that was put in by the government to break you down to this subclass, you see, and not be a world community. So to call you an African American is to disconnect you from that global community and that great diaspora that we were talking about. So that's a political move.
Are we the true Native Americans?
Yes, come on. The average Native American was this brother's complexion at the turn of the century. Now when you say Native American, it's some white person with a feather in his hair. So how in within blue eyes? So how in 1 year, how in 100?
Each 500.
It's jointly in 70.
Okay. Tell them to pay reparations first. Then we can consider paying that.
If they
we have no money to pay, they must pay reparations first. Then we can enter into that debate.
All right.
And our reparation is nothing less than $5 trillion. That's what you owe us. You're asking money from people you stole from. You're asking money from people you stole from. You steal from people and still go and ask money from. You are the ones who are owing us. You have eaten a lot from our land, from our minerals.
The question is a simple one, which is if this court
You're asking money from people you stole from.
The state of Oregon has an incredibly racist history. In 2020, the African American population of Oregon was less than 3%. But why is that? Well, we can start to uncover answers if we go back to the 1850s. Oregon was officially established as a state in the Union in 1859. First, white settlers generally opposed slavery, but also opposed living alongside African Americans. So they thought they could kill two birds with one stone by moving here, prohibiting slavery, and prohibiting black people as well by establishing exclusion laws. The three exclusion laws established in Oregon's earliest days. This one that prohibited slavery altogether. This one that would make slavery legal for only a short period of time for the white settlers who did bring their slaves anyway. But this would then free the slaves, and the black people who were enslaved would have to basically leave immediately. This one that basically prohibited black people from being in the state at all. These exclusion laws were not generally enforced, but they had their intended effect. The 1860 census for Oregon reported 128 African Americans out of 52,000 people. In 2013, only 2% of Oregon was black.
Beginning in 1846, over 150,000 California natives are slaughtered. Here are the architects of this genocide. John C. Fremont. He's responsible for killing thousands of Native Americans in California. Fremont would go on to become a U.S. Senator. The city of Fremont is named after him. Leland Stanford, the founder of Stanford University. He helped pass legislation in California legalizing the extermination of California Indians. He made his wealth through stealing Indian land. Serenus Hastings, founder of the first law school in San Francisco. Hastings financed and organized the killing of California natives. Read up on the Round Valley Massacre. Andrew Kelsey, who was responsible for the Bloody Island Massacre of Pomo Indians. Kelseyville, California is named after him. Peter Burnett, the first California governor. He repeatedly lobbied for the extermination of California Indians. These are your American heroes.
I saw this meme on the internet that pointed to the fact that Oklahoma has a very weird border. It just has like a strip of land that's like perfectly rectangular. And it's just like, what's going on over there? So I reposted it, and a buddy of mine hit me up and said, you know why that is, right? Slavery. So I said, I went down the black hole. Turns out there was something back in 1820 called the Missouri Compromise, and they basically established a border for slavery. It was the 3630 latitude line, and it basically said that any states above here can't have slaves. And Texas said, they literally shortened their borders and gave it to Oklahoma so that they can keep slavery. They ducked the parameters. Fun fact, look it up. Texas literally ducked the slave laws. American history.
Our young people don't care about school because the meal that they're being fed and overfed is a doctrine of white supremacy masked in history, masked in geography, masked in science, masked in mathematics, because none of them want to deal with what the black man gave to the onward march of civilization. So if I don't see myself in the picture, why am I interested? If we are not in the schools, in the process of education, if nothing is being said to show us what we contributed to this that is called America, not only from the slave plantations, but we gave science and mathematics to the world. We gave architecture to the world. Why don't our children know this? So, my brother, we need a new educational paradigm. It's not going to come from white supremacy.
But being friendly and being a friend, I think, are two different things. I think there are many whites who act friendly toward Negroes. A fox acts friendly toward the lamb. And usually the fox is the one who ends up with the lamb chop on his plate. The wolf doesn't act friendly, and therefore the wolf has more difficulty in getting the lamb chop in his plate.
I'd like to point out, though, that...
And I say that because it is usually if you study the structure of the Negro community, economically, politically, civically, psychologically, and otherwise, it's controlled by the white liberal, who usually poses as the friend of the Negro, who actually differs from the white conservative in the same way that the fox differs from the wolf. Their appetite is the same. Their motives are the same. It's only their mannerisms and methods that differ.
This chart to me represents beautiful, educated, moneyed black people all over America. It could represent black organizations, it could represent black churches, it could represent black social and civic organizations. And what you will notice about these beautiful black people all over America is that everybody is doing their own thing, caught up in a Eurocentric value of rugged individualism, having forgotten that it takes a village to raise a child. There is no power here, brothers and sisters. There is no power here. Power is most effective concentrated. You can take a 55-gallon drum of water, spill it over, it will disperse, find its own level, and eventually evaporate. You can take that same 55-gallon drum of water, put it under pressure, put a lid on it, put a hose in it, put a nozzle on the end of that hose, and it can cut concrete. There is no power with us being disconnected. See, there's nothing wrong with dispersion. I live in Cleveland, you live in Atlanta. We have folk in the Caribbean, we have folk in Africa. That's dispersion. That's okay, but we do not have to be disconnected. We are a disconnected people. We are powerless in disconnection. This is where all the power is. You see? This is where all the power...
Is that Prince or King? Come here, Prince. What's today's mathematics?
Hey, yo, no disrespect, but we ain't in all of that, son.
Build, destroy. To build is to elevate the mentalities of self and those around self. To add positive energy to every nation. To build, you must first start from the root, which is the knowledge foundation, and add on to the highest peak. To destroy is to eliminate and destroy any and all negativity that enters my cipher of supreme harmony.
Peace, God.
Peace, God.
Come on, son.
First of all, let them know that every group on this earth understands that you're in a team relationship. Racism is a team sport. It came into existence as a team. You play as a team or you lose by default. And only with black folk do people get upset when black folks start talking about coming together and uniting and working together and cooperating together, buying from each other and supporting each other. You know why? For a simple reason that everybody understands. When you come together and unify, that signifies strength. And right now, everybody right now is pimping and hustling black folk. They've been pimping and hustling black folk for 400 or 500 years. We spend approximately 97% to 98% of all our money outside of our own community, as an example. And we don't practice group economics, we don't practice group politics. All that makes, when we spend 98% of all our money outside of our community, what that does, it makes the other groups enriched. They now are living off of two incomes. They live off of 100% of their money and 98% of our money.
Blacks don't have no mind. The black man is just a basketball man, a gold mine, a coochie man, and a car. That's what he spent all his money on, and he ain't bought no land. You ain't got no land, you ain't got nothing. And you ain't got no law. You let the white boy make the law for you. Democrats, Republicans, that's their game. Donald Trump showed you that's their game. Now it's time for blacks to create their game, which blacks are not strong enough to do that. J. Edgar Hoover said you cannot organize the black man in America. You can order Nigerians, Zulus, Kenyattas, they know who they are. The Negro do not know who he is. He don't even have his name. My name ain't my name. That's that Peckerwood's name. When we left that slave plantation, and we go over here to another plantation, our name changed to whatever his name is, whoever bought us. So now here we are right now in 2022, and we're killing one another. The white boy used to sell mama that way, sell a daughter that way, sell a son that way, and sell a husband that way. We fornicating with one another and don't even know it because we all kin.
Tell me something that is not in the Bible, but people think it is.
White folks. The people that did this to both me and Corey that are still working, they're still out there, and they're some of the richest, most powerful people in this business.
And they are.
And they do not want me saying what I'm saying right now.
Are you saying that they're pedophiles?
Yes.
And that they're still in this business?
Yes. Roses and sunglasses and
You're damaging an entire industry.
I'm sorry, I'm not trying to. I'm just trying to say that it's a very important, serious topic.
They don't want you to think of transgenderism as a psychiatric, psychological process that the person is suffering under, but yet they want to bill insurance companies, so it's got to sound like a medical condition. So they came up with gender dysphoria, and all the while they're waving their hands going, but this is not a pathology. This is just, it's kind of like a diagnosis, but it's not a pathology. Well, if it's not a pathology, why are we amputating people's genitals and breasts? What's that about, right? Is it an objective reality or not? And if it is an objective reality, why are you operating on their genitals? Since we stopped doing frontal lobotomies, nobody has done surgery for a psychological problem.
I have no idea why you want drag queens to read books to your children. What in the hell has a drag queen ever done to make you have so much respect for them and admire them so much? Other than put on makeup and jump on the floor and writhe around and do sexual things on stage. I have absolutely no idea why you would want that to influence your child. Would you want a stripper or a porn star to influence your child? It makes no sense at all. A drag queen performs in a nightclub for adults. There is a lot of filth that goes on, a lot of sexual stuff that goes on. And backstage, there's a lot of nudity, sex, and drugs. So I don't think that this is an avenue you would want your child to explore. To actually get them involved in drag is extremely, extremely irresponsible on your part. And I understand you might want to look like you're with it, that you're cool, that you're woke, that you're not a Nazi, that you're not a homophobe, whatever it may be. But you can raise your child to be just a normal, regular, everyday child without including them in gay, sexual things.
The most toxic fruit of this ideology is in medicine. Hence the faddish response to gender discordance called gender-affirming care. Gender-affirming is, in fact, sex-denying. For minors, it involves refashioning the body to fit a distorted idea in the mind, rather than helping minors adjust their distorted self-perception to their bodies. In the U.S., gender transition surgeries for adolescents increased nearly fivefold from 2016 to 2019. Despite a slowdown during the COVID lockdowns, this upward trend continues. Until recently, childhood gender discordance was extremely rare and mostly restricted to pre-pubertal boys. Most cases actually resolve themselves after the child passed through puberty. In contrast, starting a child down the gender affirmation pathway makes it far more likely that he or she will go all the way, even if he or she later comes to regret it. Here's the dirty little secret. There is no reliable scientific evidence that these treatments improve the long-term mental health of these minors, let alone that the benefits outweigh the many risks. What's more, both the minors and their parents often receive misleading information about both the benefits and the long-term risk of these interventions. This is emotional blackmail.
My name's Jennifer Bridges. I'm still a nurse, but I was fired from Houston Methodist. Other doctors, whistleblowers were coming to me to share information. So I've seen text messages, I've seen emails where Methodist Hospital threatened their doctors. You cannot sign medical exemptions. You cannot talk about, you cannot report adverse reactions to these vaccines. And then if you do, and if somebody was actually brave enough to do that on writing, there were other people higher up to erase those. Those were not to be allowed on record. I have the proof, and I have the people that have shown me these things.
I think, about a plan to buy Marvel, the comic business, back in 2001 or 2, I think it was. Let's listen to this.
We could easily go into Universal and buy. We would own Jaws, E.T., Close Encounters, all the classics from Universal. Own all of that stuff. And that will allow us to do a channel. Part of the Marvel channel can be not only the Marvel characters, but Marvel films like the catalog. We could do anything we want, from restaurants to retail, theme parks.
Now, you actually got the financing in place, I believe, for this deal. Then came the scandal court cases, and it all got put on the back burner. Disney ended up buying Marvel and doing exactly what Michael had predicted and making a fortune at it. Tell me about this.
I'm going to tell you a number of things, but you really only have to remember 2 words. Governments lie. Very important to remember. Governments lie. I mean, not just the American government. Governments in general lie. Now, when I say all governments lie, that may sound like an anarchist statement.
Example, in this book by Snyderman and Rothman, the IQ controversy, is a survey of 1,000, a little over 1,000 of the elite psychologists in the country. And over 50% of these elite psychologists agree with Murray. They believe that there's a genetic difference in intelligence between IQ and school success. That's how they responded in this survey. There were 47% who answered yes, there's a genetic difference of the ones surveyed, but of the ones who responded, 47% responded, over half of the ones who responded said they believed that white people were more intelligent than black genetically.
So the notion that Murray is letting out some little secret is not...
Well, no, but let's follow the line, because there's another survey that was also done of whites and others in the general population. And this was done at the Chicago's Opinion Research Center between the University of Chicago and the University of California, San Diego. 2 scientists a few years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, surveyed the general population. They found out that approximately 57% of the whites in America believe that black people are genetically inferior to whites in intelligence. So you have Murray's book, then you have better than 50%, I think it's around 54% of the respondents in this survey of the elite psychologists in the country who agree with that point of view. Then you have approximately 57% of the general population who agree and who are willing to say so. So I don't think it's a secret, and it's clearly an opinion that is well supported in the general culture. Many of your viewers will want references and things to read, and especially the state-of-the-art scientific references. This is an extremely important book. there was a conference in 1988 in Melbourne, Australia. And it was a gathering of the world's top psychologists. And the purpose of that conference was to figure out what did they really know about intelligence and what did they really know about the measurement of intelligence. And the conclusions are in this book. There are a series of papers. This is a list of the top papers presented at this top conference. And to my knowledge, there's been no summit conference on intelligence since then. As far as I know, Murray was not at this conference. But the point was that there were three things that came out in this conference that are related to that book. One, at the conference, they could not agree after all of these years on what intelligence is. So there's no scientific definition of intelligence. There's all kinds of competing theories, but there's no agreement. That's not the strongest argument, though. The strongest argument is that when you try to measure intelligence, what this group of conferees agreed with was that they finally understand that the attempt to measure intelligence is going to be contaminated because you're trying to measure intelligence in a particular situation or a context. That I'm a product of my neighborhood, you know, that my intelligence has to be manifest through the things that I learned to do, not through the things that were learned to do across town that I've never been exposed to. That's a different context. I'm in one context, someone else is in the other context. Psychologists tried to ignore context and create a universal instrument that would measure everybody in exactly the same way. What this conference says, you can't do that. That what things mean, they mean only in the context where you took your measure. Now, most IQ tests, like the Wechslers and the Binets, do not pay attention to what I just said. And the last thing that was presented at this conference and unrebutted was that if you put someone in a problem-solving situation and you give them a very complicated problem and you see who solves that problem, and the problem is new, if it's a new problem, complicated, and you give them an IQ test and see whether the high IQ people do better than the low IQ people on this problem, what they find is there's no relationship between the IQ score and complex, novel problem-solving ability. Now that's the thing that the IQ test is supposed to be able to do best. And here it has no effect whatsoever, which is another scientific way of saying that the IQ test is basically pseudoscience.
Crew members lost their lives. This is Judy Resnick, an engineer and pilot aboard the Challenger mission. In 2013, an eagle-eyed internet user found Judith Resnick, a law professor at Harvard Law School. Some people were a little taken aback by the identical name, age, and likeness, so they started digging. This is Michael J. Smith, also an engineer and pilot aboard the Challenger shuttle, who passed away that fateful day in 1986 at the age of 39 years old. This is Dr. Michael J. Smith, professor of engineering at the University of Wisconsin. This is Sharon Krista McAuliffe, arguably one of the most famous things about the Challenger mission. She was supposedly just a teacher that was picked at random to be one of the astronauts, which made it all the more tragic when she passed away due to the Challenger disaster in 1986. This is Sharon A. McAuliffe, also a law professor who received her degree shortly after the Challenger disaster. Dick Scobie was the commander of the mission. Here's Commander Dick Scobie next to Richard Scobie, the CEO of Cows and Trees. Here's his company's original logo. It's a cow, but it's not in a tree. It's strapped to a rocket, and gee, that jet stream kind of looks familiar. In fact, just in case I wasn't making it clear, the top picture is the Challenger ship shortly after exploding. So, you know, Astronauts Ronald McNair and Ellison Onizuka both passed away when the Challenger shuttle exploded. Miraculously, it was found out that they both had twin...
Yes, we can. It has to do with cave systems, Native American folklore, and a giant cover-up by the U.S. government under the direction of Teddy Roosevelt and the National Park Service. Allow me to explain. The United States is crisscrossed by a series of extremely complex and mostly unexplored cave systems that go under the Appalachian, Rocky, and other smaller mountain ranges. Native American monsters like the Wendigo like to inhabit these caves. Short answer for why that is that they're so consumed by their desire for human flesh that they have no real sentience any longer. So they don't really think to build shelters, they just live in caves. And of course, Teddy Roosevelt, being the avid outdoorsman he was and a believer in Bigfoot, knew about these creatures. He knew that they were hunting people. He started the National Park Service so that he could have actual special forces kind of corral these things into areas where they could be managed and possibly killed, or at the very least keep people away from them. Now, why are people allowed in the national park? Well, because if you put off a lot of federal land and said you can't go here, people would ask questions. So those people getting lost are just collateral damage at this point.
See what has happened, because we in the 60s, we hit the cattle industry so big by, you know, promoting vegetarianism, and people stopped eating red meat. The cattle industry went into the soybean industry. And as my brother Kepper said, soybean is the new pork on the block. It's as foul as pork. The body cannot process soybeans. We cannot digest soybeans. Soybeans have an enzyme inhibitor that blocks the body from producing trypsin. And this is all scientific fact. You can go find it out online. The body cannot produce trypsin, a digestive enzyme that is necessary to break down the type of protein that is found in soybeans. So the body cannot produce it, so you eat the cooked soybean products, and they're not being digested. They're just not breaking down in your system.
Hey, Doc.
Yep.
Is it good for a woman to have a six-pack?
No. You want me to keep going?
Yeah.
No, it's not. Instagram says it's good, but you look at most of the Instagram models with a six-pack, see what happens behind the scenes, and they're not hormonally, they're not doing very well. So here's the thing. Women need a higher body fat percentage than men. Well, how much body fat percentage do men need? Actually, for longevity, men shouldn't really have a six-pack either. Longevity, 18 to 22% is actually preferred for men, and then women actually higher than that. I would actually say even like 25 to 30%. That means that you're not going to have a six-pack at all. What happens when a woman has very low body fat percentage? Well, they're going to be really stressed. They'll probably suffer with hormone issues, low progesterone. They also may have very, very low estradiol as well, because body fat actually helps to support your hormone levels. Low body fat, low hormones, you're not going to feel very well. So definitely no when it comes to a six-pack.
Thank you.
You got it.
The one secret you might be missing to heal a trauma bond. A trauma bond makes you psychologically addicted to your abuser. And really, there are no quick fix solutions when it comes to addiction or abuse. And equally, there is no comfortable way to experience withdrawal from addiction. Trauma bond is an emotional bond where there's a repeated cycle of abuse and giving you hope that things will change. And what keeps you hanging on are those moments when they shower you with love, a love that you deeply crave. So you'll make excuses for their behavior. They've had a traumatic childhood, it's not their fault. Maybe one day they'll get help. Maybe I can convince them to heal. But reality is that it is in no one's power to make them heal. But what is in your power is to heal yourself. And here's the secret that most people miss. The harsh truth is that for as long as you're focused on getting them to change, then the further away you become from healing yourself. This is typical behavior for a codependent. Codependents are so overly focused on how other people need to fix themselves that it diverts all opportunity to heal their own selves. Being so outward focused makes you lose connection to yourself, and boundary setting all comes from connection to self, to being in touch with your body's signals that have the ability to intuitively guide you to safety. Codependents have a subconscious avoidance of feeling into their own deep pain, and that is exactly why they will usually be in more need of healing than anybody else.
This guy was walking his dog until a cat fell on him from the sky and knocked him out cold. And his dog, wearing shoes, goes out and chews out the cat. And somehow, this was lucky, perhaps fortunate enough to be recorded by a security camera.